I'll show you how to dice and julienne a bell pepper. A couple different colors here. These are actually the same pepper, just the red one is a ripe version of the green one. The other colors like yellow, orange, etc. are different variations, so they would, generally start out as green and then ripen to one of those colors. The colored ones, red, yellow, orange, are sweeter, and then these ones have a little bit more like green, greenness to them in the flavor, I think is the best way to describe it. But they add a lot of flavor in sautés and stir fries and other uses. You want to make sure to pick ones that don't have blemishes or soft spots. So these look great. And I'll show you the traditional way to julienne and then a way that prevents as much food waste. And I think the way many people will actually do this at home. So the way that I learned in French cooking school would be to slice off the top and then slice off the bottom. And you want to make sure that you can see through this, right? And then a lot of times this would, the useful red part of this would be chopped up into something where the shape didn't matter, or you would discard it. And now I'm just going to make a little slice through the edge here. And then I want to lay the pepper flat on the board, and then I'm just going to cut along this, slicing out that white pithy part, which doesn't have much flavor. And you just want to make sure to keep your fingers out of the path of your knife. So there you go. So what's nice about that is you get most of the seeds out intact, which is, prevents a lot of excess scraping that you have to do on your cutting board. So now when you want to julienne is like cutting into little strips. Fine julienne would be more skinny, regular julienne would be, a little bit wider. And we have all the exact measurements on a nice handout in the course materials so that you don't have to remember it. But really, whatever size you want is the right size for you. So you can see that you can either cut from what was previously the inside, or you can cut through the shiny side. A lot of people will try to chop here, and this is actually slipperier, so if your knife is dull at all, you would actually have more of a tendency to slip on this side, or you have to put a little more force to cut through. With a sharp knife, it doesn't really matter that much which side you do, but it is easier to cut through the side that was previously the inside of the pepper. So I'll tuck my fingers under, and I'm just going to cut like 1/8 of an inch strips, which is a fine julienne. And you could either do perfect, or you could just try and follow the natural curve of the pepper and not waste any. I think most people opt for not wasting, but it's really up to you. You just crawl your fingers back as you go. And there we have our you can do julienne or more of a fine julienne. I have a strip here that's about 1/8 of an inch width, and then a strip that's about 1/4 of an inch width. So the 1/4 inch would be a julienne, and then the 1/8 of an inch would be fine julienne if you're leaving it in the strips. And then if you chop this up into little squares, chopping the fine julienne into little 1/8 of an inch squares gives you brunoise. And then chopping the regular julienne, that's about 1/4 of an inch wide, into 1/4 inch squares gives you small dice. So if you watched the prior videos with onions and we had our 1/4 inch dice with our onions, that's also small dice. So 1/4 inch dice is the same as small dice. So let me just cut these up for you so you can see how I do that. I tend to grab a few at a time. So I'll get some that are some similar sizes here and try to make a variety. When you do this, you will not try to make a variety. You will try and do them all the same. I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. So here we will tuck our fingers under, just like we were doing before, and make your cuts about 1/4 of an inch intervals to get your small dice. So we have our small dice pepper, and then if we take our fine julienne here, and cut at 1/8 of an inch intervals, then you get your brunoise, which is just half the size of small dice. Okay, so let me show you another way to cut peppers. Obviously that sounds a little fussy. I'm just trying to, you're in a cooking class, I'm trying to teach you the terminology, but most people would just say, finely diced, and other people would say small dice if you don't want to use the French terms. So how do I actually do this at home? I don't usually do it the proper restaurant way at home. I would just take my bell pepper and cut straight down through the stem end. And then what I would do is I would grab my scrap bowl. So I do have a scrap bowl off to the side to put all my extra bits in, and so I don't have to constantly turn or move around to the garbage or compost. And then I just pull out the insides and then tap out any seeds. So let me do that to both halves so you can see again. So I'm just sticking my fingers in, like scooping it out like this. Then you want to pull out that extra white part. That pith doesn't have much flavor. Doesn't have a nice mouthfeel either, so tap out the seeds. So again, I'm cutting from what was the inside. It's just easier to cut through. You're less likely to slip. And I'm just holding my, I know it looks odd because this can roll a bit, but my fingers are curled under, and if I slip, there's no way I can cut myself. So I'm just going to do quarter inch, you know, what would be like a julienne, but it's going to have the curved edges. And now that I got to this part, you can use your paring knife if you want to work closer. I don't like having to be fussy and move to different knives, so I'm just going to take the end and you know, cut that out, always keeping my fingers out of the way of the path of the knife. And then you can, you know, cut more pieces. There you go. And then there's that white part again, and so you can cut down. I'm cutting toward the cutting board. When I get to the flat part, I'm just going to cut along that, grab the back, so I'm cutting away from myself when I get to that end. There you go. And now we would have the no waste version of the julienne, and of course you can pile them up and dice them. You're not going to get perfect squares this way because you have that curve, so you can just kind of eyeball it, do the best you can. But you know, they are close enough in size that you're still going to have a pretty darn close cooking time with the slightly different size pieces. So that is our, you know, our less fussy small dice with our like no waste julienne.